You worried about any RPEs at this point? I know AJ's not a big fan of that. Or is it just kind of take it to the house, whatever you end up getting, you get?
Yeah, no RPE. Maybe if I'm doing a deload week, maybe I'll leave a rep in the tank, whereas maybe on a normal week I wouldn't for a movement. So something like that. And the past week or so, I've been a little more mindful of that, not just, making sure I'm not, going for any reckless reps or, attempting any reps that I'm not fully confident I can, complete. But for the most part, no, we weren't tracking RPE.
Yeah, that's definitely different than how you were doing things prior then, like you had mentioned. Or at least there was a period where you started tracking RPE.
That was really just when I was working with Jeff. We were using the reps and reserve approach, but typically when I would do my own training, it was like I wasn't necessarily tracking RPE, but I was just essentially, perhaps not going to failure the initial sets, going close to failure, but leaving a few reps and then like going all out on the last set of each movement.
Gotcha. When you start becoming more mindful or aware of leaving reps in the tank, like you had mentioned before you were working with Jeff, you weren't really like tracking. Once you start becoming more aware of leaving reps in the tank, then it becomes a bit of a mind game in a way. You're almost kind of like, I don't know about this, right? Like at least that's how it was for me. You either love it or you don't. I think it's from who I've also, a lot of the people I've spoken to, it's kind of like you're either on one end or the other with that. So
yeah, I think, for me, like, man, well, it depends on the movement too, but like, doing like a hack squat, it's for me, like, even at this point, I've been training for over 10 years now, but it's like, man, I still don't think I could accurately gauge reps and reserve on a hack squat, man, because I can't tell you how many sets I've done now with this approach. And I've gotten done with the set and thought like, man, I really don't think I could have done that last rep if I had, been trying to gauge the reps and reserve, but I went for it and that came up. So it's like, it's hard, in my opinion, to accurately gauge reps and reserve for a lot of movements. And you have to be very seasoned, in my opinion, in your training to accurately gauge reps and reserve. And I think that is the mistake a lot of early lifters make now, is that they want to adopt that approach, but they haven't gained that ability to accurately gauge reps and reserve yet. And so, again, like if you've never really taken sets to failure, then you just don't know. And so you'll do a leg press set and not realize that you really had 5 reps in reserve. You thought you only had like 1 rep in reserve. This approach has helped me in a way because I feel like I've become more accurate. If I did ever want to go back to that approach where I was, utilizing reps in reserve, I feel like I would be a lot better with gauging RPE because now I've spent a much more extended period of time like actually taking sets there. So I really have gotten better while still not being perfect at it, but I've gotten better at, being able to gauge like, okay, I think, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have had another rep there, or maybe I did. And in my opinion, it's harder than people really realize, like to accurately gauge that, man. Like, and especially like, in my opinion, like how do you know, like if that was like when people will say, that was a 7 or that was an 8, like, are you sure? Like,
right. Yeah.
I mean, that's not easy. That's really hard to gauge that. Or that was a 9. I had maybe 1 rep left. It's like, how accurate can you really be? And that's not me trying to oppose that style of training by any means, because there are so many people who have crazy physiques and who have been so successful while using that approach. And like I said, I've used that approach some, and I still to this day intuitively utilize that, I guess you could say. For me, initially, like I said early on with my approach, it was more so like I would pick a load and I would have a given rep range, and I would pick a load that I could use and stay within that rep range. And, I would take the last set to failure so that, hey, if that last set I was well beyond that rep range, then that was a sign that I had more reps in the tank those prior sets than I thought. That was a way where I could, make sure I was not just undershooting that RPE in a sense, because I was leaving reps in reserve the initial sets, but then the prior or the final set, I would take it all out just to make sure, like, okay, maybe I picked a load where I was trying to hit in the 8 to 12 rep range, and maybe I was saving reps those initial sets, and maybe the final set I hit like 15. Well, then I knew like, okay, I definitely could go heavier next time. I definitely was undershooting that, so that was a way to ensure that by at least taking 1 set to failure. So I think that was one good thing I was doing early on. And so, yeah, I was ensuring that I wasn't just completely undershooting myself. And I think a big takeaway is just to experiment, try different approaches, which is what I've been doing, which is like why I started working with AJ and wanted to, try his approach to training. It was a lot different than what I was doing before. I was having to really change how I executed movements because, if I'm only doing 2 sets, then that means I need to make sure I'm really getting everything out of those 2 sets. I think, yeah, try different approaches, try out a higher volume approach, see how that works, see how you like it, try out a lower, a higher intensity, lower volume approach, see what happens. I mean, I think that's a big takeaway is just to actually experiment on yourself and see what works for you, see what you enjoy, and at some point I may switch up my approach from where it is right now. But yeah, I think that's a big mistake is people get caught up in just one approach and they've only done one approach and then they talk bad about the other approach that they've never tried. I don't get that. Like I'm not opposed to any of these different approaches, because there's been people who are doing, each example we talked about and who are successful and who have seen a lot of progress. I think the biggest part of it is you have to train a way that you enjoy. You have to enjoy what you're doing.
So you mentioned you're in the gym 5 days a week at the moment, but you are doing things differently than you did prior as far as volume and intensity even is concerned. So let's break it down. What's the split look like?
I've run the same split since I started working with AJ, actually. It's a 5-day routine, and